What I'm wanting to do today is, one is I picked up a new valve spring gauge. One, the gauge in the last video was junk. So don't buy that Amazon analog gauge. That thing's garbage. The problem I had was when you're at a low number, you just can't read it. It starts off at like, I don't know, I don't have it anymore, but it almost started off at like 10 or 20 pounds. And then to get to a number, it just was ridiculous. So this ProForm here is a digital gauge. Now it reads in increments of 2 pounds. But it seems to be, has great reviews, and it seems like a good one. I may have a 1 pound difference since I'm not getting ultra precise, but this is affordable and seems pretty accurate. So I want to measure these valve springs, for one, for reference for myself, but two, to see if there's a difference between the Gixle like we suspect. I also picked up a CC head kit. And so what you got in here is you got a plexiglass plate, you got a syringe, you got a water bottle. You know, these are like little head leveling kits, with little bolts, which we're not going to use. But what you do is you take your head, and I'm going to set it here so I don't mar it all up. The plate goes on top of the combustion chamber, and there's a little hole in there. Now you'll put Vaseline around here to help seal it. But then we're going to take the syringe and fill the combustion chamber, and that's going to measure the size of this combustion chamber. And why I want to do that is because this has numbers on it, and it'll give me a CC calculation for the combustion chamber size. And so I can take that info, plug it into a formula, and that's going to give me compression ratio. You know, after I get into the jug and I do stroke, and there's some other numbers I got to get, which we'll get into that down the road. But yeah, this gives me a good start. So I want to do that. I also want to take this kit and use that same method to measure the port sizes. So one, it's going to tell me how much bigger these ports are. You know, we did a visual check. The Naraku seemed like the best pick, followed by the Tata. I think it's Tata, so I'll say that from now on. But that'll confirm it. Additionally, when I get into porting this, that's going to tell me the difference. It's going to tell me the difference I make in porting the head. So, you know, because I plan to get up in there and, you know, back behind the valves and all that. So that's going to tell me how much volume I opened up in that head. Lastly, I picked up it's a Harbor Freight special. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a metal plate with a rubber seal. I'm going to reinstall the valves on these heads, and then I'm going to pull vacuum on each one of these ports. And so the goal of that is it's going to tell me how well these valves are actually sealing. So I want to do that in stock form, and then I want to do it after I port it and lap the valves. So I think that's going to tell me, A, if there's a difference in how well these valves are sealed. You know, someone mentioned the Gixle may be the only one with the valves lapped. So that'll tell me if, you know, hey, this one is sealing better than the others. But also it's going to tell me is after I lap the valves, you know, are they sealing, are they tighter? Okay, so we're going to start off with the Gixle Head. We've got the valve springs right here. Slight correction from the last videos, the Gixle did have washers. They were stuck in there and I didn't see them. But so what we got rigged up here is I'm going to do the measurement on my vise now. The reason being is on my arbor press I was cranking down, and I thought I might get some inconsistencies by putting force by hand. So what I'm setting up here is we're going to stick this gauge in the vise with the valve spring, and then I'm going to slowly tighten it until the spring height is at what I measured for the installed spring height. And we're going to take our readings and see what we come up with. Okay, so Gixle valve springs, here we go. Okay, so we're at 34 pounds. Okay, Tata valve springs, here we go. So we are at 36 pounds. Okay, Naraku valve springs, here we go. Okay, 42 pounds. So I thought it might be a good idea while we have this we're going to stick the valve spring in here. We're going to measure it. We're going to try to go to full compression. And I'm going to measure collapsed height and then get a measurement on the actual gauge of that rating to see if that gives us maybe anything useful. But I figure the collapsed height might be good for coil bind. See if we can shoot out an eye here. And lose my I need to glue these things on here. It drives me nuts. But I'm just using a filler gauge. So right about there, we look like we're pegged out 212 pounds of pressure. So we're at 17.83. All right, so next up we've got our Tata. We're getting coil bind there. 16.49. And we're at about 100. We're floating 178 to 180 pounds. All right, so here is the Naraku. I'd say we're at coil bind there. Yeah, 18.6 we'll call it. All right, so now we're going to measure our combustion chambers. And we're going to use the kit we showed earlier to measure that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a spark plug in here. Then I'm going to take, you can use Vaseline, which I found out I don't have any. But I'm just going to take and rub some oil. Alright, we'll call that good. We're going to stick our plate on. And then we're going to fill our syringe. Right at 60. All right, there's no air pockets in there. You can see there we're at 60. And then we're going to just stick this in and fill her up. All right. We're right at 55. I'm sorry, 45 milliliters. All right, so that was our Gixle, which my initial impression was the Gixle had a bigger combustion chamber, especially than the Naraku. The Naraku, my thought was the Naraku had the smallest combustion chamber, which should net the highest compression. Going to do the same thing here. Really doesn't seem like you need a lot. Okay, so do the same with our fluid. See here, diaphragm's at the top of the 60. $46.5, $46.25. And the last one, the Naraku. Must have dripped a little water. I don't think that leaked under the valves, did it? Don't have any water in there. No. So neither of the heads seem to have leaked water, which that's a good sign. There. All right, so we're at 60. And let's see if we're right. Right. We are at 46. So that proved me wrong. Well, I guess that just proves, you know, looking at something doesn't always tell you. This one's not leaking either. I still got the water. It's pretty wild, isn't it? All right, so let's confirm our port sizes. If I recall, our visual check and measuring the outer size of the ports, the Gixle had the smallest, followed by the Tata, and then the Naraku was the largest of the three options with the port. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same method we use for measuring the combustion chambers. I'm going to fill the intake and exhaust ports with fluid to see what we measure. If anything, that'll tell us the difference in size between the three. And then I figure when I get into porting, which I don't know how far I'm going to go with the Tata, but I can see before and after, you know, of how much I increased the port size. So let's get at it here. We're going to follow the same method. Okay, we're at 60 ml. We're going to start with the intake side. All right, that looks like it. Let's see if we can save some of this water, so I don't have to keep filling that up. Okay, our intake port. We are at 41.5. Okay, let's measure the exhaust port. Okay, we're going to call that good. We're going to call that 40.5. And these numbers, we would subtract that from 60 to get our measurement. So we got our Tata ready to go. We're going to do the intake side first. Oh, there it is. Our Tata is at 37. Be curious to see if the Tata did follow the same as Gixle with larger exhaust port than intake. Okay. Exhaust port is smaller. At 40, we're at 40. We're just under, we'll call it 42. Wow, that's wild. Looking at that, the exhaust port on the Gixle is actually bigger than the exhaust port on the Tata. And I guess I can see it if you look at the where the valve the area. I don't know if they do that for more strength, but there's definitely less material in the Gixle there. Alright, so now we've got our Naraku, which we think has the biggest port sizes, so let's confirm. We'll start off with the intake here. So we are at 36. So that confirms intake port is largest on the Naraku. Alright, so let's check our exhaust. We're over right there. 39.5. So that confirms it. Interesting. Tata, Naraku, both larger intake ports than exhaust ports. Gixle, opposite. Alright, so now we're going to get on pull and vacuum with our vacuum gauge. And I need to make a flange that I can put a threaded fitting on and just basically butt up to this. And we'll hook our gauge up to it and we can pull vacuum. So what I'm going to do is the intake manifold is pretty similar to the size of the exhaust. So I'm just going to trace this directly on here. And that will be our flange. Alright, so we're going to try using our portaband here to cut this. I got these fittings off Amazon, and they're an MPT thread pitch, 1/4 inch MPT. So I ordered a little MPT cap set. Which just looks good. Alright, so we'll just drill out our center punch line, and then we'll run the tap through there and pop that on. What I'm thinking is I'll thread this in, and then I'm just going to knock, because this is going to pop through, I'm going to knock that smooth so there's not something when I'm holding up here that could kind of scratch these surfaces. And then after I do that, we'll put the gasket on and we should be ready to... I went through that much easier. Alright, so yeah, we should be able to get that in there. Cool. So we'll find out, but it looks like 15-30 seconds is the ticket. I've been snagging up some Icon stuff when they've been running 40 and 30% off. And I'm really happy with their tools. I find this gray stuff, I've had to do some plumbing around the house, and I've had the best luck with the gray. I had some fittings that just kept leaking, and redid them a few times, and then I went to that gray and I haven't had an issue since. Hopefully that seals. Looks like it should. So we'll just buzz that off, make that smooth, put our gasket on, we should be ready to rock. Alright, there we go. Whenever taking stickers, I always like to just fold a portion so I can kind of line it up here. I can stick that on and then just kind of peel it back. And, you know, on this you can kind of adjust it. On a sticker, I take and kind of push out in the air while I'm applying it. It always seems to help applying stickers. All right. It's not perfect, but looks like it'll work. I'll poke a little hole, take a pick and just poke a hole on the for the port. All right, so we've got a Harbor Freight contraption rigged up here. So I tapped into this line because I'm thinking this gauge just is garbage. Let's see what happens. We're hitting 65. Maybe we can measure how fast this drops. Okay, we're up to 65. We are at 53 at a minute. So our max was 65, and then 1 minute we were holding 53. See if that tells us anything. So this is going to 66. Let's get our stopwatch handy here. Okay, so let's get her to 66. Let's start. Wow, we're losing quick. You know what I think that is? I think that's that flange. The surface here, as it loses pressure, it gets less suction on the gasket. All right, so exhaust side, we had a max of 66. After a minute, we were at 0. We'll log that and see how these other ones come out. Okay, so intake. That's going up to 66. don't know if it's me, but it seems like it's holding pressure better. But it just dropped pretty quick there. Oh, we're at 58. So max is 66 and then 58 after 1 minute. Well, it seemed like those were sealing up better. Let's try the exhaust. So that one's 60. We'll call that 67. $57. So 67 and 57 after 1 minute. All right, let's see what Raku does. It'll be interesting because tighter valve springs. I wonder if that'll help things. It seems like it almost would. We're touching on 68. It's not quite 68. We'll call it 67. Hands cramping up. I have to hit the shake weight. All right, there we go. We'll call that 53. So max is 67 and then 53 after 1 minute. It's dropping quick now. Alright, exhaust. Call it 67 again. $53 again. So same thing, 67 and 53. All right, so I'm sure there's some way manufacturers of heads or something test this a little better, but you know, working with what we got here, I think it did give us some useful info. Based on these tests, if you ask me, you can definitely see the Gixle valves. They're not sealing as well. The exhaust side dropped significantly. We didn't even really hold pressure to a minute like the other two. The intake side was similar to the Naraku after a minute, but it didn't hold as much pressure initially, so that leads me to believe that the valves, you know, on this head are not sealing as good as the other heads. Seems like the Tata did the best on that. It had the highest after a minute. The the 66 on the intake side was lower than the Naraku, but this gauge, you know, this is not precision instrument here, but you know, I think it gives us useful data, and can honestly get a comparison here. Just 3 off-the-shelf heads, hooking up a gauge, see what happens. I know it helps me, kind of confirms my suspicions and what I think. You know, the 3 options, I really like the Tata. The valve springs, you know, definitely seem like the winner to me. The, you know, out the box, just this seems like the better option here. The downside is the exhaust port was definitely a little smaller, but you know, we're just measuring volume here. They may flow bench these, you know, for all I know. Who knows? I know people generally recommend to just hog these things out. I know on Steve's Trailmaster, he hogged his Gixle out big time. I mean, there was literally no material left here where this is. I mean, he went so far, he actually poked through and then they welded and then they grind it back down. And it seems to be holding. And, you know, that cart, you know, the camera doesn't really do it justice. It's a ripper. So, I don't know if I want to go that far when I start porting mine. I'm going to get into it, see how it goes. I mean, there's not a whole lot of room here. I do see some areas we can kind of clean up that I definitely want to clean up. I don't know if I want to take as much material where the valve, you know, for the valve seats and all that. You know, I don't know. I guess when we get into it, we'll see. I might try to do a little research on that as well, see if I can come up with something. But I definitely see some opportunities for, you know, just kind of, let's see, this is the intake side, just looking at it and, you know, picturing flow, like areas to where, like rounding off this lip here, kind of beveling that down, kind of opening this up, smoothing this seam here, kind of cleaning up these valleys. Up here there's like a lip here which we could kind of round off. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know if I'm going to hog this out. I mean, it looks pretty thin if you look here to where this material's at, and I really don't want a chance poking through. So, you know, I don't know. I guess once we get the die grinder in our hand and get at it, you know, it may be a different story, but you know, that's kind of where we're at. What do you think, girl? What are you doing? She's ready to go inside. So, yeah, so hopefully this was useful. Take this data how you want. You know, like I said, I'm not a professional engine builder here. I'm just trying to learn and was trying to, you know, there's no info for these. I thought this was a good opportunity when I was doing this to put some info out there, you know, and hopefully help someone out. And heck, if anything, if there's someone watching this that, you know, has tons of experience with this and you see something that could be useful, you know, leave a comment. So yeah, other than that, we're going to call it a night here. Have a good night and thanks for watching.